The New York Jets rookies report to One Jets Drive today, and one specific executive had some not nice things to say about our franchise cornerback, Sauce Gardner. What's up, everybody? Welcome to another edition of Jet Nation Live. We are your hosts, Dylan Tereman and Chris Schubert. No Glenn Naughton today, but if you listened to him earlier, you knew that we were going to hop on live here tonight, give a couple opinions. We are 1 week away from camp. Chris, how we doing?
Doing good, Dylan. That the excitement is in the air. This is the slowest sports week of the year. Baseball gets back underway tomorrow, but you can feel it everywhere. Every media source you consume, you can see it on Twitter. The buzz, the hype is starting to leave the station here for football, and so it is very exciting because I think we all think this is going to be a very fun season for the New York Jets, and so we just are waiting for that moment to get here when they start playing football games. So it's very exciting.
Yeah, I think Exhibit A of it being a slow media week is just the amount of Devontae Adams to New York Jets talk. So been a week. A little bit of news to go over, and then we have a fun topic at the end. We're going to go over rookie expectations for the drafted 7 players and a couple UDFAs of note. So first things first, Jeremy Fowler put out a list of top 10 at each position. This is given by coaches, executives, scouts throughout the NFL. He does this every year, so it's a great piece by ESPN. But there's a couple of things that we have to discuss in terms of where the Jets were ranked, and this is just—it's not even homerism at this point. But the first one is Sauce Gardner at cornerback 3, Patrick Surtain 1, Denzel Ward 2, Sauce Gardner at 3. First off, I have a problem just with the sheer rankings out front, and then it goes into depth and it says where his highest position was, where his lowest position was. And one of these people who is ranking him put him outside the top 10. Huge red flag on whoever that was. And then the article, the little blurb goes on to say, you could call holding on every play. So I don't know if this was an actual NFL exec or if this was just a Dolphins fan that snuck in with some credentials and found out a way to call him a holding merchant once again. But Sauce Gardner is cornerback 3. What are your thoughts, Chris?
Yeah, listen, I think he's the best corner in football. If you wanted to tell me that you would take Patrick Surtain over him and have him as CB2, fine. Denzel Ward is not a better corner than Sauce Gardner. I'm sorry. If I'm starting a franchise right now, I'm taking Sauce Gardner over Denzel Ward. And then, again, that's not to say Denzel Ward is a bad player. He's a good player. I just think Sauce is that much better. I'm not. Look, this is the time of year where these types of lists are produced, and it gets people all upset. Sauce Gardner is really good. Sauce Gardner plays for the New York Jets. I am going to have fun watching Sauce Gardner play for my football team. I am not going to get caught up into nonsense and silliness on the internet in the middle of July before the season starts that, they didn't rank Sauce Gardner as the number 1 corner. They ranked him as the number 3 corner. Sauce is really good. Sauce plays for my team. That's going to equal a lot of fun. That's the way I look at this stuff.
Yeah, I think that's a very level-headed approach to the whole thing. I do agree, though. Denzel Ward being number 2 is a bit suspect to me. I think Sauce should be 1 or 2 on that list, with Surtain being the opposite 1 or 2 there. The other one that I wanted to get your opinion on was Quincy Williams, not making the top 10 after being a first-team All-Pro. I don't know if the honorable mentions were in order or not, but he would have been 13th. C.J. Mosley was 11th. Honestly, realistically, you could flip those two first and foremost in the rankings, make Quincy 11th, and then it's probably a bit of an easier pill to swallow knowing he's the first one off the list. But they had guys like Owusu Koromoa, Tremaine Edmonds. Like, I don't know if those guys are necessarily better than Quincy Williams, but it is only one good year of all-pro play from Quincy. So do you think 13 is right for him, or do you think he should be higher?
It was the last thing you said there that I think is the reason why you can't get too upset over this. We all went into the 2023-2024 season saying, what version of Quincy Williams are we going to get? Is he going to be the boomer bust player that we have seen, or is he going to eliminate some of those bust plays? Is he going to eliminate the bad plays and increase those great plays and make his floor a lot higher and his ceiling a lot higher? He did that. He checked that box in a big way. He was easily a top 5 player on that defense. You could probably say he was one of the 3 best players on the defense last season.
Mm-hmm.
But one season in the national big picture macro view, I don't think wipes out the stigma that Quincy Williams has as a player. If he has another year this year like he did last year, then you're talking about a top 8 player at a position, a top 6 player at this position. But I do think there's going to be some hedging of, okay, yes, he did it for one season. That's great. But I've seen him be a boom or bust player, and maybe just for one season he was all boom. And maybe this year he's going to have some of those bust plays. I don't think that. I've seen enough from the way that he played last year to think that this is a different version of Quincy Williams. But I can understand the hedge. I can understand the pumping the brakes of one season does not completely erase what you have been throughout the entirety of your career. So no, I'm not going to get too upset about that.
Yeah, I think I agree there. If he does repeat this production from last season, or even comes close to repeating his production from last season, then yeah, he should be in the top 8, maybe even higher. I had him at 7. I think you and Glenn both had him at 11 in our overall rankings, which we know that they're subject to change. It's the middle of July, but just having Quincy as a fringe top 10 player on the Jets, top 10 player at his position is, from what he came up as, is just a huge progression and a huge, nod to the coaching staff and everybody involved.
I'm pulling up my list because I believe Quincy was very, very, yes, he was 11th for me. He was locked into the top 12. You're not changing my mind that he needs to be in the top 12. He was 11th. And on the defensive side of the ball, he was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. He was the 6th ranked defensive player for me amongst my 11. So high praise from me from Quincy Williams, if everybody knows my history with Quincy here on this show. But yes, I think hedging and saying maybe not top 10 just yet, show us it for one more season. I think that's fair.
Yeah. And I believe October he was player of the month for the AFC. So, just keep stacking up those accolades. I'm sure he'll get there. And I think we all know that he can be a top, 6 linebacker in the league. And then the last one, it's not really a bit of a gripe for me, but just more of like a projecting and hoping that this is what we see from him. But Aaron Rodgers was ranked as the 8th best quarterback. The only problem I really have with the list overall is CJ Stroud at 7. I think one really good year, you win Offensive Rookie of the Year is great, but like 7 is really hard in like the entire NFL, especially when you have guys like Dak Prescott at 10, even Goff at 9. I think those guys could be, looked at as higher than Stroud based off 1 year of production. But Rodgers at 8, I think if you get anywhere close to the 8th best quarterback out of Aaron Rodgers for the New York Jets in 2024, this team is probably winning a couple more than double-digit games. You're looking at 11 or 12. You're probably looking at winning the AFC East. 1, if not 2 home games in the playoffs. That would be fun. So what are your expectations as far as QB8? Do you think that's fair for him? Do you think he's going to come in a little bit lower? I know obviously age and injury off the Achilles weighs into a lot of this.
I tend to be one of the more pessimistic people when it comes to projecting what Aaron Rodgers is going to be in 2024. I think him being a top 8 quarterback, which is what this list suggests, is the ceiling for Aaron Rodgers in 2024. And I'd be very happy to be proven wrong. But I think when you add in multiple factors, factor number 1, he's going to be 41 years old in the middle of the season. There is a handful, and it is a small handful. You don't get to the full 5 of quarterbacks 40 plus years old that can put up the type of numbers that some people are throwing around for Aaron Rodgers. So that's factor number 1. Factor number 2, he just had a major lower leg injury. He tore his Achilles. That is not an injury that you just waltz back into like it's a cramp or a hamstring strain. That required major surgery, major rehab. So that's factor number 2. And factor number 3, you have to go all the way back to the second of the back-to-back MVPs to find the last Aaron Rodgers-esque season. The last year in Green Bay was not very good, and we had all the excuses in the world. Team wasn't very good, the thumb injury that he had, just all the excuses that we lined up for the reason why he maybe underperformed what he had done the 2 years prior. He did not have a good season. We're multiple years away now, removed from the last great Aaron Rodgers season. So you add all of that up, and I don't think it's unreasonable to say, is he a top 16 quarterback in the league this year? Is he a top 14 quarterback in the league this year? And I think those are more realistic and fair expectations, because I think if you're going into this season expecting, not wishing, but expecting Aaron Rodgers to be a top 5 quarterback in the National Football League, I'm sorry, I think you're going to be disappointed by what you see this season. That does not mean the Jets can't be successful. That doesn't mean the Jets can't win a championship. Brock Purdy went to a Super Bowl. Jared Goff and the Detroit Lions were one good second half away from being in the Super Bowl. Do I think Aaron Rodgers can be better in 2024 than Brock Purdy and Jared Goff? I do. I think he can be better than both of those guys. Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs were not world beaters throughout the course of the regular season. They turned it on in the postseason. Could that happen to the New York Jets and Aaron Rodgers? Yes, it could. So I just think you need to shape the expectations correctly. I think a top 8 quarterback would be the ceiling for Aaron Rodgers, but if he's a top 12, top 14, top 16 quarterback, that should be enough for the New York Jets. So I have zero issue with it. I have zero issue with CJ Stroud being put in front of him because of all of the reasons that I just mentioned with Rodgers that I think are more cons, where there's the con for CJ Stroud is he did it for one season. It's the only con you can come up with. Right. And the entire team around him got better this season. So I have zero issue with him being 8. I have zero issue with CJ Stroud being in front of him. And again, I think him being a top 8 quarterback, 1, would be a great thing for the New York Jets if that's where he ended up. And 2, that's probably the ceiling for him this season.
Yeah. Dano has a question for you specifically, Chris. Is it smart to put Aaron in front of Bosa right away? He needs preseason reps.
I understand the premise behind the question, and I think it is extremely logical and reasonable to look at the first game of the season and say, my goodness, are we really comfortable having a 40-plus-year-old quarterback coming off of an Achilles injury play against Bosa and the San Francisco 49ers in that defense? I understand it. I understand that risk. But if we are in a position where we don't feel he is ready for week 1 of the regular season, then we need to go back and have an entirely different debrief and conversation on what they did this offseason. Changes the entire complexity of the way they behaved. They behaved like a team that Aaron Rodgers is going to be ready for week 1. And so if Aaron Rodgers is ready for week 1, there's no training wheels. This team cannot afford to have training wheels. There are jobs on the line. This team needs to win every game possible. The schedule is not easy. They are going to have a second half of the year that could potentially be brutal for them if they don't stack up wins early enough in the season. And I don't have them winning the San Francisco game. I have them losing it. But again, this is not a bridge season for Robert Saleh and Joe Douglas. Oh, don't worry. This year we're just going to kind of hopefully take the next step, and then 2025, that's the year. No. There are jobs on the line. This is not a situation for training wheels. And so, you could say, is it smart to put him in front of that? Maybe not. But guess what? The Jets can't afford to play it safe. Yeah. We're not in that position. It's not how this is going to work. Tyrod Taylor can't play 6 games for the New York Jets and then hope Aaron Rodgers is healthy 6 games into the season and then hand it off. Because to me, if you're saying that we can't put him in front of Bosa, what's the difference between week 2, week 3, week 4? I can name one player on every team they're going to play through the first 5 weeks of the season that maybe isn't Bosa level, but can absolutely put him in the same position he was a year ago, 4 plays in when he snapped the Achilles. So I get it. I understand the cautious nature of it, but I think that 1, the Jets are not in a position and can afford to do that. And 2, I just don't think that's the way sports work. You cannot play it safe. You cannot try to let's just try to find the super perfect ideal scenario. Because again, late in the season, are you going to sit him against Buffalo? Are you going to sit him against Miami? No. So there is no situation where you can put training wheels on this team early on in the season. I think it's a disaster.
Yeah, and honestly, I don't think it's a matter of putting him out there opposite of Bosa. It's the guy who's across from Bosa, and that's Leonard Floyd, the guy who did it the first time.
Can you put up Dano's response to what I just said? Because I think this is very
absolutely
important. I think there's something that is missing here. Because he says, I'm just the PTSD wondering if we shouldn't slow roll him, but with preseason reps he'll be okay. Just could stand for it not to be a week 1 bloodbath. And I get it, we are tortured Jets fans. I understand. But I am trying to come at this from a reasonable perspective to just allow you to maybe think a little differently. If you take the emotion of what happened a year ago, right? Take the emotion of 4 plays in Aaron Rodgers tears his Achilles. And I get it. It is still a strong emotion. I can envision where I was sitting in this house. Okay, I can go back to that place very easily. But remove the emotion of it for 2 seconds. Do you feel confident in the roster that the New York Jets have put together? Do you feel confident in the offensive line that has been put together to protect Aaron Rodgers? Because to me, if you're saying I'm worried about it being a week 1 bloodbath, you're saying I don't like the job Joe Douglas did this offseason. I'm still worried about the offensive line. And I'm not. I'm not worried about the offensive line. It is a different offensive line than it was a year ago. So if you are still concerned about Aaron Rodgers' safety and Aaron Rodgers' potential to be injured again, then what you're saying is, I don't think Joe Douglas did a good job. I don't think this offensive line is complete. And I'm not sure that has been a popular take or a take that has been out there the entire offseason. If anything, it has been the complete opposite. We have praised the job that they have done because I'm one of the people that didn't think they could do this job. I didn't think they could put together 3.5 quality starter offensive linemen that I felt were going to be able to put this team in a position to be successful. Well, they did. Does it work out on paper? Who knows? We're going to play the games. But they did the things they needed to do. And so to me, I'm not worried that we're going to see a repeat of what happened 4 plays in a year ago.
Right.
I'm not worried about that. I am worried about a 41-year-old quarterback just being old. I am worried about the Tyron Smith and him being old, just taking a step back. I'm worried about Johnson. I'm worried about all these players for other reasons. I'm not worried about a fluke injury that happened 4 plays into the season happening again. That to me, that is you're taking the emotion a little too far. You have to remove that from the equation.
Yeah, I certainly agree. And I understand, like, there's a lot of, like, oh, it's the Jets, something bad is going to happen. And you just kind of sit there and wait for something bad to happen. But I don't know. This year seems a little different because on paper, Joe Douglas seems to have taken the steps to put the roster in a good spot where you don't go into the game with, like, oh, Carter Warren as your starting right tackle to start the season.
Let me just expand a little bit on this, and then I know we're going to actually get to the topic we're supposed to talk about on the show today.
Sure.
If the offensive line underperforms and the offensive line isn't good this season, let's just live in that world for a second. We're midway through the season and we're coming on this show and the chat's lighting up and Dano and Rich and Daniel Murphy and the three of us are all complaining about the play of the offensive line. Are those complaints going to be because Joe Douglas didn't do enough? He used the first-round pick on a backup left tackle when he could have taken a receiver. He spent a lot of money to get Tyron Smith to come over from Dallas to New York. He traded for Morgan Moses. He went out and signed John Simpson. A year ago, they used a top draft pick in the second round to get Joe Tippmann. Elijah Vera Tucker has been a stalwart when he's able to be healthy. If this group doesn't perform, it is not going to be for Joe Douglas's lack of trying. That is the one criticism you need to take off the table, because you cannot say that Joe Douglas has not tried at least this specific offseason to fix this offensive line. So if it is a problem, it is not a criticism of he didn't do enough. It is a criticism of the players underperformed, there were injuries, or he didn't pick the right players. That is a different conversation.
And it's a conversation we could have been having. I know you're not a Hard Knocks viewer. You watch the most important parts on social media.
That's exactly how I'm consuming the current Hard Knocks as well.
But there was a piece.
It's completely clear.
There was a piece about the Jets and the Giants pursuing the same offensive linemen too in free agency. And the Jets got neither of them. Instead, we got John Simpson and we traded for Morgan Moses. Did you happen to see this? Do you know what I'm talking about?
So I did not see the clip that you were referencing, but I'm assuming we're talking about John Runyon because he ended up with the Giants, and I'm sure that he was one of the guys, obviously, because of the Green Bay connections that made sense. Yeah,
yes.
So listen. If the New York Giants, who everybody praises the job that Joe Schoen is doing, says he's a great GM, and I think he's a great GM, and I think honestly, I'm a little different. The clips that I'm consuming from Hard Knocks makes me like Joe Schoen even more as a general manager. I love the way he's approaching this. He is extremely football business oriented, removes the emotion from it. I love it. But again, this offensive line has been put together in potentially the best way possible. Young players, draft selections, high-priced free agents that have a long track record of being really good at key positions. And guess what? If Tyron Smith stinks, the Jets picked up a really nice insurance policy, which potentially could segue us into our conversation for tonight, because they have understood in years past we've had these injuries. Let's be better at that this year, and you've seen that. So again, I understand you have nightmares about 4 plays in. I get it. I'm with you. I have the same nightmares, but you need to take the emotion out of it. Part of the reason why 4 plays occurred is the offensive line stunk, and you saw that when they had a revolving door at quarterback. So this offensive line is a lot different.
Yeah, and we can use that all to segue in. But first, I do want to say what's up to everybody in the chat that's commenting.
What's up, everybody?
Greg, he was the first one in here. I think this one came in, 8:23, 15 minutes before we even went live. So shout out to you, Greg.
I'd like to make a little joke that maybe will get me in trouble with the bosses, but very bold of us to try to compete directly with the RNC and Trump's speech tonight. That's very, very, very interesting programming by us to try to compete.
I truly had no idea that there was priority viewing over us out on Jet Nation Live. We have Dano in the chat, of course, who gave that great topic. Daniel Murphy, as always, what's up? My info. So is the Jets getting Adams? I believe that's Devontae. Yeah, we'll circle back to that, like early September, late September, early October. We'll circle back to this conversation. But for now, I think let's just have let the media have their fun with it. Rich says Jet up in the chat. What's up, Rich? All right, yeah. So the reason we're for the show tonight, the main topic was going to be to discuss rookie expectations. As you can see, the title of the show: How impactful will the draft class be? I think in years past we've done similar episodes at some point throughout the offseason, and it's a loaded show because a lot of these players came in with really high expectations, regardless of where they were drafted, regardless of what they did in college. So it's been a nice shift. Obviously, you saw our ranking show, what was it, last week or the week before with Glenn on as well. So you saw that there weren't that many rookies rated highly on the list, as opposed to, 2-3 years ago, Bryce Hall being a top 14 player. But we're going to start at the top and work our way back down. We're only going to do the 7 drafted players and then maybe a couple UDFAs that we think are important of note. And most of those guys, like their best attribute would be just to make the 53. So to start off in the first round, 11th overall pick with the trade down from 10, obviously they got that insurance policy we were just talking about. Olu Fashanu, tackle from Penn State. I'll kick it off. I kind of just put it together in my head, like a high low, like a ceiling floor of expectations. I'm not going to go out and like rattle off a stat projection for every single player, but for Olu, I think his ceiling is he has to play 8 to 10 games at both left and right tackle because Tyron and Morgan Moses spend time on the injury report. Obviously, we know he's going to get the first team reps at left tackle because Tyron does not practice. He only does walkthroughs and games. That's it. So his ceiling to me is playing 8 to 10 games as a serviceable to above average left tackle. And I think the floor for him, honestly, is he just doesn't play enough for us to know what he is. But I don't see a world where he comes in and he is just flat out a bad tackle at both left or right tackle, honestly. So I think the floor is pretty high for Olu and the ceiling is pretty high as well, considering we don't know how many games he's actually going to play.
You're going to hear me say this potentially a couple of times during the show. I'll try to just leave it here as a blanket statement and not get to it again. But if I do repeat myself, I've given you forewarning. The best case scenario for Olu Fashanu is he has a nice spot on the bench with a tablet. That is the best case scenario for Olu Fashanu. Not because he's a bad player, not because I don't want to see him play, but the best case scenario is Tyron Smith is awesome at left tackle. Like, is awesome. Is the exact player that he was in Dallas and is you are a bouncer in the club. You're not getting in. Sorry, you're not on the list. That's what Tyron Smith is on the left tackle. Morgan Moses is the same at right tackle. And we don't have to see Olu Fashanu play. That's the best case scenario. If Olu Fashanu doesn't play a single snap in 2024, you know what that means? Fast forward to the end of the season. If you told me Olu Fashanu played 0 snaps, that's a good thing. That's a great thing because then that means the 2 guys that did play were really good, didn't get hurt, and they were rock solid for this team.
Yep.
The worst case scenario is Morgan Moses is inconsistent, or Tyron Smith, because he's old, gets hurt. And now a player that a team used a top 15 draft selection on, who everybody thought was one of the higher rated offensive linemen, one of the offensive linemen that could play right away, gets thrusted into action and we get to see him play. That's the worst. The worst case scenario is the good offensive line prospect that we drafted in the top 15 has to play. Think about that. Yeah. Think about what we were saying about a first round draft pick. The best case scenario is he doesn't play. The worst case scenario is we get to see him play. And that's what Olu Fashanu is. It's perfect. It's why the draft strategy, while to some people was a little bit out there, that they didn't take a receiver, that they doubled up with a backup player. This is why they did it. Because when we have this conversation, they have just the perfect ace in the hole if things go south with their 2 tackles. The perfect ace in the hole.
Yeah. I got thrown off by my alarm that I thought I still turned off pre-show.
In the pre-show, you did say you had turned off the alarm. It appears as though you did not do that.
Apparently did not. Quick question, or I guess not question, but comment in the chat from Daniel as it relates to Olu. Is there a better player to mentor him than Tyron Smith? I mean, it's perfect.
And that's not even the mentoring. It's not even the mentoring. Tyron Smith is not going to practice all week. Olu Fashanu is going to get all the reps with the ones. I'm a broken record. I've said this before. It's going to get all of the reps with the ones in the lowest risk environment possible.
Yeah.
If he makes a mistake in practice, it's not going to cost the Jets a divisional game against the Bills. It's not going to cost them a key game late in the season with the division potentially on the line. He's going to make mistakes in the week 2 practice where he's practicing with the ones and everybody knows Tyron Smith's starting on Sunday.
Yep.
That's what makes it so good that he's going to be there. So yes, he's going to be mentored by Smith, but he's also going to get all the reps in the lead up. The only thing he's not going to do is play in the game. It's perfect. It is the perfect scenario for Olu Fashanu and the New York Jets.
Yeah, and I believe Olu was asked about like Tyron Smith when he was first drafted, and he just said how much like he loves Tyron Smith. So it will be a nice mentor student type of relationship. But yeah, you hit the nail on the head. The fact that he's playing meaningful reps without meaningful repercussions is just huge for your development. Like if you told me I could go to my job, make as many mistakes as not as many mistakes, but a handful of mistakes in a day, but then I can come back tomorrow and have no problem about like, being fired or anything. And I can learn from those mistakes and build on those mistakes. I feel like I will learn the job a lot faster than walking on eggshells, being thrust into a game week 2, 3, or 4, which obviously could still happen, but I should have phrased mine instead of ceiling floor worst or best case scenario like you did, because the way I described my ceiling is the way you described your worst case scenario and vice versa. So I think that was kind of cool how we did that there. What else we got in the chat? That's basically what I meant. Plenty of reps to learn, a Hall of Fame tackle to learn from in a similar playing style. Yeah, exactly. And Olu alluded to that he plays a lot like Tyron. He tries to emulate a lot. And I mean, why not? Because when Tyron's healthy, he's a top 5 left tackle in this league. So, and a pass protecting left tackle is, I think, more to Olu's strengths. So next on the list, we didn't have a second round pick, obviously, in the Aaron Rodgers trade. So we jumped to the 3rd round where we traded up for wide receiver Malachi Corley, Western Kentucky. What do you got, Chris?
So this is the player that does not have that blanket statement get applied to him, because he is a player that is going to be on the field a lot for the New York Jets. So the best case scenario for Malachi Corley is he is the stud that everybody in that Jets front office thought he was, that was going out of their way to try to trade up into the 2nd round for him to be able to get him, and was stressing about him hoping to be there at the top of the 3rd so they can move up and get him. And he can be the number 2 or number 3, depending on how you feel about Mike Williams, wide receiver on this football team. That's the best case scenario. The worst case scenario, and this is where he is the one draft pick I think that can have the most impact on this team, is as a rookie in an Aaron Rodgers offense, he struggles. He struggles to find the consistency. He struggles to maybe be in the right spot. He maybe has some drops, and he just doesn't develop that chemistry with Aaron Rodgers the way that we would like him to be able to hit the ground running. And because of that, now what we thought might be a decent to above average wide receiver core for the New York Jets all of a sudden has got Garrett Wilson and then a bunch of guys with a bunch of question marks. That's the worst case scenario for Malachi Corley. He is the guy that we're going to talk about tonight that is going to, in my opinion, and this is not a novel take, he's the guy that has the most impact on the 2024 team of the draft picks. Olu Fashanu, as currently constituted, 0 impact on the 2024 success or failures of the New York Jets. Malachi Corley, I think a big impact on the success or failures of the 2024 New York Jets. And so that's why he is so important. And that's why the way they feel about him is what gives me so much confidence, because they must feel that he can hit the ground running with how excited they were about acquiring him.
Yeah. And to all those points, and I think the evidence of trying to trade up for him just speaks to what they think he can do. So my best case scenario for him would be wide receiver 2. Obviously, that means Mike Williams might be slow coming on in September, maybe even miss a game or 2 coming off his injury. So that means Malachi Corley has that chemistry with the Rodgers. He's thrust into the wide receiver 2 type production. He immediately hits that ground running. He gets close to 1,000 total yards because he's going to be factored in the rushing game. And I guess I can ask you this question now, but no, I'll wait till we get to the other player in the example. So yeah, close to 1,000 total yards for him. Whereas worst case scenario is Xavier Gipson starts over him in the slot. He's pretty slow coming on. They can't really get much going. Nathaniel Hackett doesn't realize that he can run the ball out of the backfield until week 12 or what have you. So it's a lot more of situational based, more so than production. but there is a world where I think he doesn't necessarily hit the ground running and immediately gain that chemistry with Rodgers. So there is a worst case scenario with him, but you have to hope that he gets close to that best because, like you said, he does have the most impact of all the rookies, almost by far. I think it's a huge drop off. And I think the next person we're going to talk about probably has the
Yep.
second
Yep.
biggest impact.
He's the next
And
guy that is worth mentioning.
yeah, and I think it's worth mentioning with Malachi. If I didn't at the top of the show, he just signed his rookie deal
Yes.
yesterday. 4 years, 6 million and change is the total sum of the deal, which I think is like 21% of 1 year for Tyreek Hill. So I think it's just incredible that if you are able to get a good player in the third round, this is why guys like Puka Nakua and all these late round picks are just so important to have. And not all draft picks are created equal, and fifth round picks can be something. So moving on to the fourth round, pick 134 overall, running back Braylon Allen from Wisconsin. I'll start with this one. I'm super high on him, and this isn't just oh, well, the Jets drafted him and I wasn't sure who he was, but now I really like him type of deal. This is a guy that I watched not extensively coming out, but I watched Wisconsin in the spring game, and then I kept up with them. And obviously, he is pretty much a highlight reel to a degree. So yeah, my expectations for him coming in as a running back two, clear cut running back two, um, they're pretty high. If he doesn't get 500 total yards, I think that's a disappointment. He can easily get 250 in each category, passing and receiving, or rushing and receiving, excuse me. So I'd say 500 yards is like a comfortable thing. So maybe his best case scenario is, maybe they don't want to run Brees into the ground and they want to use Braylon a little bit more. And they have a game where they're up in the second half and the running backs might get 36 total touches combined, like or 36 total team rushes. You don't want to give Brees Hall 30 rushes. You want to give him maybe like 20 rushes. So those other 14, 16 carries got to go to somebody. And if he can chew up 10, 11 of those in not garbage time, but in, the second half of football games, I think that's really important. Worst case scenario is he and Isaiah Davis, who we'll get into, have more of a competition. Doesn't really go well for Allen. They kind of both split duties behind Brees Hall, and the only way they're relevant is if Brees misses extended time. But I think more of a committee approach, and not a committee approach, but Brees and then Allen still playing in more so than like a 90-10 split with the running backs.
I am going to when having these conversations about these players, I am trying to blend both a best case and worst case scenario for them as individual players, but also looking at this from the success or failure of the 2024 team. And so when looking at Braylon Allen, the best case scenario for him and for the team is he is the RB2 on this in this running game. And he is the AJ Dillon to Brees Hall's Aaron Jones. That's the best case scenario. That is what the Jets envisioned when they drafted Braylon Allen, is they want a 1-2 punch at running back that, you're preparing for Brees Hall, and Brees Hall is going to be a problem for you, but don't forget about Braylon Allen. How many times, maybe not so much recently, but at the beginning of it in Green Bay, every time you're like, you got to worry about Aaron Jones. You got to worry about Aaron Jones. And then all of a sudden, A.J. Dillon hits you for a 50-yard gain, and you're like, I forgot about him for a second. That's what the Jets want. They want you to pay all this attention to Brees Hall. Brees Hall, Brees Hall, Brees Hall, Brees Hall. Boom. Then we're going to hit you with Braylon Allen, who we think is a hard hitter and a guy that can get downhill and run people over out of the backfield. That's what they're hoping. That's the best case scenario. The worst case scenario is Izzy Abanikanda and Isaiah Davis, are taking snaps from Braylon Allen, and the running back two is actually a rotating, revolving circus, because then the Jets have no identity. They don't have any consistency. That means they are not getting the production that they need out of that group. Somebody's not doing something correctly, whether it's pass catching out of the backfield, whether it's pass protecting, whatever it is, they are not providing it out of the RB2 spot. And that means you're giving reps to Izzy Abanikanda. You're giving reps to Isaiah Davis. That's the worst case scenario for Braylon Allen, is that the running back two position becomes a revolving door.
Yeah, and that's the better way to phrase it. I said a committee approach, but it's like Brees and then committee. So it's like you don't want that committee approach behind him. You want that clear-cut 1-2 punch. And I think all signs point to the hype going to Braylon Allen. Obviously, the aesthetic is there with his cool visor face mask combo. But yeah, I think Braylon Allen is in for not a boom of a production year, but a good productive year in terms of running back too. All right, now we go into the 5th round where the Jets had 3 total picks. At 171 overall, they took Jordan Travis from Florida State. This one, I mean, I feel like it's an easy one. Best case scenario, he gets the medical red shirt or the red shirt. They put him on IR. He doesn't make the 53-man roster. He's safe for the entire year. The Jets don't not waste a roster spot, but don't need to allocate a roster spot for him. He can learn behind Aaron Rodgers, hopefully come back next year, either compete or be the outright quarterback 2 if Tyrod's still here or not. Worst case scenario is he actually makes the initial 53-man roster. They have to put him on IR. I mean, they could IR him afterward, but if he is on an IR and can play later on in the season and they have to play him, is probably his worst case. I don't want to see Jordan Travis on the field at all, which kind of puts you in a bind at quarterback for the preseason. Andrew Peasley, I believe is how you say his name. We're going to see a lot of that kid coming out in August. So, yeah, Jordan Travis, far away from the field for me in 2024.
I don't need to echo the same things that you just said. That's Jordan Travis. If I see Jordan Travis on the field, bad things have happened. It's just been really bad.
Jobs might be lost if Jordan Travis has to play football.
And that's not a shot at Jordan Travis. I actually like the pick a lot.
Yeah.
If I see Jordan Travis on the field, we might have an intervention on whether or not we need to find a new team to do a podcast about.
Seriously, we would be deep into the draft talk if.
Oh my God, I mean, we love it, but at the same time, I can't do that again.
It sucks. Yeah, it's like you wake up and you're like, I'm so happy we get to talk about draft, and then you look outside and it's like there's no snow on the ground, like the leaves are barely turning colors. Like it's
September 27th, and I'm talking about draft prospects. I can't do it again. I literally did it last year. I tried. I did my best to try to rally the troops after the game 1. I had an inspiring speech after the first game, but it didn't last very long.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard when you got to watch he who will not be mentioned at quarterback play.
Yeah, we are banned from mentioning his name on the show anymore.
All right, 2 picks later at 173rd overall, the Jets double up at running back and take Isaiah Davis, South Dakota State. Chris, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, the best case scenario for Isaiah Davis is he's a really impactful and really important special teams player. And that's good. That's a good thing. The new kickoff rules and the new special teams rules means the Jets have to get some production out of that room, out of that spot. They need somebody that can help them flip the field. They need somebody that can help them on kickoffs, give them short starting position. They need somebody that can help in that regard. And they drafted Isaiah Davis. Yes, he plays running back, and I understand he might be in this mix, but they drafted him because he was a return guy in college. That's what he did. And so to me, the best case scenario for him in 2024 and for this team in 2024 is Isaiah Davis is the return man, and he is out there making plays and being super impactful in that side of things. The worst case scenario, and it might be the best case scenario for Isaiah Davis, is something happens to Breece Hall. Braylon Allen doesn't play particularly well. And now Isaiah Davis is all of a sudden in the mix for one of those top 2 RB spots, and we're trying to figure out ways to get Isaiah Davis involved in this offense. Now, he might be up for the challenge. He might be up for the task. I don't think I want to see that. No offense to Isaiah Davis. I'd like Breece Hall and Braylon Allen to be the 1-2. But if there's underperformance, if there is a need for a spark, then maybe Isaiah Davis finds himself in that mix. So again, I'm trying to blend the best and worst case scenario for the individual player and the best and worst case scenario for the team. Maybe that opportunity presents itself and Isaiah Davis shows he's a diamond in the rough. That's possible. I'm just saying right now, I don't want to root for that because then that means Breece Hall and Braylon Allen didn't work out the way we wanted it to, and that's not a fun place to be.
Yeah, I agree. Anything more than like RB2B is probably too much for Isaiah Davis for his plate in his rookie year.
If he is RB2B, and I love that you've coined something there that I think we're going to use here when discussing somebody being really close in a position battle. But if he is RB2B, to me, that says more about what Breece Hall and Braylon Allen have or have not done than it does about Isaiah Davis's play.
Right.
Specifically.
Right. No, I agree. And I have this cool question written down, but to echo your point about special teams, yeah, this is probably the Brant Boyer pick, considering they double up at a position like running back. They're talking about he was on the Jets official podcast with Eric Allen, and he did confirm that they are going to flirt with the 2 running back or the 2 return man system. So that helps players like Isaiah Davis make this roster. I also think he could be a core player on kickoff and punt team where they're going to, especially kickoff team, they're going to need to prioritize speed, probably a little bit more tackling. They might want to get lighter and leaner to be faster. Whereas on the opposite end, on the return team, you might need the heavier players blocking for him. But the question I wrote down, and I was thinking about this the other day, who do you think has more touches in 2024? Shouldn't say touches. I should say rush attempts in 2024. Isaiah Davis or Malachi Corley?
I need the question one more time. I need to
Who has
really feel it.
who has more rushing attempts in 2024? Isaiah Davis or Malachi Corley?
This is predictive or what I want?
Predictively. This is more just a gauge.
Predictively, it's Malachi Corley.
Right. And I think that's the it's not the surefire answer, but when you think about averaging 2 carries a game, you're looking at 34, 35 carries, whatever, for Malachi Corley. Does Isaiah Davis get 35 carries if he is RB2B or RB3? I don't know. 35 carries is not a ton, but I don't know. I feel like Malachi Corley should be far and away with the touches, or the carries, I should say. I don't want to say touches because that's unfair. But that's just kind of the gauge of it, is like RB3 versus like a dual threat wide receiver. I still think the dual threat wide receiver should get more actual rushing attempts.
I also think if Isaiah Davis out touches Malachi Corley, again, that says a lot about either Malachi Corley or the rest of the running back room. Not so much as it says something about Isaiah Davis.
Right, exactly. But I thought that was just a good question to kind of gauge expectation for Davis, is that like wide receivers should probably get more handoffs and work out of the backfield than he should. All right, the last of their 5th round picks, 3 picks after that at 176, cornerback Quantez Stiggers from the CFL, the Toronto Argonauts. This is a pick that made Jeff Ulbrich cry during the draft call. A really good story. Obviously, coming from CFL, he had to stop playing college football when his father passed away. Went home to take care of his family. Had opportunities. I think he did the fan-controlled football league for a little bit, which is just like, I watched it on TV for a little bit and just like, all right, this is a little much, but hey, people come out of nowhere nowadays in the sports world. So to me, depth cornerback, best case scenario, he's your pipeline replacement for a guy like DJ Reed. And, next year you could be asking yourself, okay, maybe they didn't extend Brandon Echols and now Quantez and I don't know, some 3rd or 4th round pick are competing. And who else? Bernard Converse. Those guys are competing across from Sauce as cornerback too. I think that's the best case scenario. It's not a redshirt year for him. You can probably use him on special teams as well, but you got to hope he's just a depth piece, maybe cornerback 5 right after Brandon Echols. Worst case scenario is, I guess the worst case scenario for a lot of these guys down the bottom is that they have to play and they're not good. So that's all right. I have is like a worst case for him.
And I think the next player that we talk about in Jalen Key has that same, specifically being a 7th round pick at a position that I feel he is, speaking of Key, probably lower on the depth charts and probably more in line to potentially not be in the rotation. Mm-hmm. But when it comes to Stiggers, I'm going to blend 2 best case scenarios that we talked about earlier. I'm going to blend the Olu Fashanu best case scenario and the Jordan Travis best case scenario. Because to me, the best case scenario for him is he is in a low risk environment like Fashanu. And if he sees the field like Jordan Travis, it's bad news. It means something terrible has gone wrong. And I mean for extended run. They're obviously going to rotate corners and you're going to see guys on the field, right? And so there might be a play or two. If something's up with DJ Reed or with Sauce, he might be out there, right? I'm not talking about that. I'm talking if there's an injury to one of those guys and they're missing multiple games and he's out there, I just think, again, he's a 5th round pick. He's a great story. I think he's got some potential, but I do worry about the year 1 implications of throwing a kid out there in a high risk, high reward type environment. And if he fails, what that does to his confidence. And so to me, best case scenario is your depth. You get to learn, you get to hang out with Sauce Gardner and DJ Reed every day. Those are fun meetings. Those meetings are probably really fun, informative, insightful. You probably learn a lot. You become a lot better. And then if called upon, it's like super late in the season. That's best case scenario.
Yeah, and like, there was that one-off game like against the Eagles where Sauce and DJ Reed were both out. And then you had guys like Craig James and Tay Hayes come in and perform well. So that's kind of the hope, is that he's just a sponge in the cornerback room, so that when his number is called upon, um, I don't even know what number he is. Usually I'm on top of that. I was going to say whenever his number is called upon, I want to say 43.
No,
Um,
no, not 43. How about 37?
Oh, he got the Bryce Hall number. That
He's
makes sense.
37.
Okay,
Yeah.
there you go. So yeah, when his number's called upon, you just hope that he can do his job to a level that shows that he's better than a fifth round pick. And I think he can do that. And obviously the coaching staff has a lot of faith in him, so they're not going to put him in a position where he's going to struggle to make a name for himself, so to speak.
And
And then
no,
yeah,
Dane, I'm not counting blowouts, like, because that's the perfect scenario to get him in there. I'm not counting that kind of stuff. I'm counting Sauce Gardner or DJ Reed misses 2 games because of a hamstring. That's about as willingly I'm willing to discuss injuries with those two guys. If they miss a game, 1 or 2 games because of like a hamstring strain or something, that he's in there and playing in those games. I'm not talking if he gets mop up duty because the game is lopsided one way or the other and they find reps for him. That's not what I'm talking about. Those types of reps, those are fine. But I'm talking if somebody, God forbid, gets hurt and we're talking about needing a replacement for 6 weeks, that's the type of run I don't know if he's ready for. And I don't know if the Jets want to be exposed in that regard.
Yeah, I think like when we do these exercises and we're projecting like expectations, roles, whatever, everything is probably should be said at like a neutral game script
Correct.
where the score is close. Nobody is, it's not a lopsided victory or defeat where it's just like garbage time the whole way. No, these are like, meaningful games, like meaningful, scores, nothing crazy. So, all right, last one here, 7th round pick, mystery relevant, number 257, safety Jalen Key, Alabama. We obviously went over his worst case scenario, obviously just seeing the field probably. But I think the best case scenario for him is making the 53. And this is going to be a testament to, does Joe Douglas love his draft picks or not? Because you have 4 safeties, in my opinion, ahead of him, making him safety 5.
Yep.
And you have even UDFAs like Al Blades Jr. and Jarius Monroe from Tulane. They're also, decent players in their own right. Monroe, I know, was like talked about getting drafted. He was mocked to the Jets a lot. So Key might be on the outside looking in. And if he makes the 53, it's probably because Joe Douglas doesn't want to part ways with his draft picks already, but he'd probably be a candidate for the practice squad. Best case scenario.
Yeah, I echo what you just said 100%. I mean, this is Mr. Irrelevant pick, so I think him making the roster is going to be a little bit of an uphill battle. It's really going to this is one of those camp battles to pay attention to, because I legitimately think JBC and Jalen Key is something to keep an eye on. I really do. I think it is something to keep an eye on here, because I just don't see a world where they carry 5 safeties. I think it's going to be 4, but we'll see. But yeah, I think best case scenario is he's able to make this team. And it's certainly a possibility. I just don't know how likely it is, and we'll start to get those early indicators when camp opens up.
Yeah, and realistically, we don't know what position JBC is. You could list him corner, safety.
Yeah,
I know
they might have him as a corner, and then that changes everything. Then all of a sudden, I'm like, all right, Jalen Key's making this team. He's the 4th safety.
But is he actually, because they moved Isaiah Oliver to safety? So now you have Tony Adams, Ashton Davis, Chuck Clark, Isaiah Oliver, or JBC.
That's
so
true.
like,
That's true.
At best, he's safety 5. Like, that's so hard, and I don't think they've ever kept 5 safeties under Robert Saleh. And I put my hand up. I was the first to admit that I was completely wrong the year that Sauce Gardner and Kyle Hamilton came out of the draft. I said that safety was a more important position to Robert Saleh than cornerback was. And I'm glad to be wrong, because we have the best cornerback room in all of football. But I thought safety was going to be a priority, and clearly it has not been. They've been bargain shopping ever since. So do they keep 4? I'm not sure. Maybe they do keep 5, and is it still Jalen Key? So it's going to be hard for him to make the 53, which, again, not a indictment on him as a player, but it just goes to show the strength of this roster, that 5th, 6th, 7th round draft picks are questionable to make the team. Why are we mad at that? I don't know. So any other final thoughts here before we get out of here? Shorter show this week. Obviously, we got 1 week until camp even starts. So
yeah, lots of storylines for us to probably get into here, and I'm very happy, and I'm not opening this can of worms. I'm just mentioning it. I'm very happy that we went 50 minutes and we did not discuss at all. Not once. Maybe it was a brief mention. We didn't even discuss trading for Davante Adams. I'm proud of us both. Because it is ridiculous. It is ridiculous to even suggest that that's going to happen right now. So I'm proud of us for not wading into the waters that everybody else was wading into today. We did something different.
Yeah, the most I have to say is we'll circle back late September, early October, and we can talk about that when football games are actually being played and the records are, what they are. If the Raiders start slow and the Jets start hot, sure, we can talk about it. But for now, it's the middle of July. We need to be talking about things like golf, college football 25.
That's right. I got some games to go win with UCF right now.
The fact that we have 1 week left, so knock on wood, there have not been any Jets players in the news getting in trouble during this time period. No one driving backwards drunk down the Lincoln Tunnel. So it's been a good offseason. We have 1 more week to go. Obviously, the Jets' first practice is 1 week from today. So if we don't do a Wednesday show, if we do a show on Thursday, they will have already practiced, which is just incredible to think about, or they'll at least have reported and shown up and worked out and done some things. So next week, I assume we'll have Glenn back, and we'll probably do a training camp preview. Maybe we'll give our top storylines for the 2024 season. And that'll be a nice little primer for what we have in store for training camp, which is hopefully some boots on the ground for Jet Nation, getting out to One Jets Drive, and hopefully I can report back to you. We have to get the okay on training camp passes yet, but hopefully we're going to be out there for you guys. Other than that, I appreciate everybody tuning in. Check us out on social medias at Jet Nation all over the board. Check out the forums. Glenn would be mad if we went 45, 50 minutes without mentioning the forums.
That's true.
Very, very entertaining. You can find a lot. I think there's probably every theory about the Jets, good, bad, or indifferent, on the forums, and you can really get into some good conversations. I got lost in there for about a week and a half, and I had to pull myself out. I was in there checking comment after comment on some of my posts because I would just like tweet something and then put it in the forums just to see a different audience because I was getting a little stale on Twitter. And boy, like I had to tone it back a little bit because there was just some crazy good, crazy bad theories. But Jets fans, we're all over the map with it, but we're all diehards at the end of the day. So appreciate everybody tuning in. Obviously, everybody in the chat, we greatly appreciate you guys sticking with us throughout the summer, checking us out and talking about rookies instead of anything political tonight. So we appreciate you. You can check Chris out at Chris Schubert _ on Twitter, and you can follow me directly at D Tereman. And we'll catch you guys next week. Have a good night.